Today in my writing process playlist, I'm talking about finishing the first draft of my novel. So to start with, it's a huge weight off my shoulders. I'm quite relieved. To be honest, I really dread first drafts. I think they're the worst part of the process. They're just a slog, in my opinion. I don't find them fun at all, whereas the later stuff I actually find quite enjoyable. It's just getting everything down is kind of a difficult thing. It's not easy, it's certainly not smooth, and it's not simple in any way. It's a little bit like cutting your heart out, but you are doing it to yourself, and I don't know, later drafts are more rewarding in my opinion. The first draft is a strange time. It's kind of like a trial or initiation of some sort. It's filled with twists of fate, magical events, synchronicities, either working for you or working against you. In my case, if you've been watching this playlist, you know I had computer problems, tech issues. This went on for nearly a month of the 3-month writing time. I'll get to more about that in a second, but another thing that kind of happened, and I think this was sort of twist of fate or some kind of magical thing, is that I've basically been a hermit for 3 months. I'm kind of a dualistic person in that way. I have lots of friends, but I definitely like my alone time. Because I moved, all my friends are in a different place, so I am Zoom calling and stuff, but all in all, I've been basically by myself for 3 months. I haven't really gone out much, and I've just been working on this. It was almost like fate was keeping people away from me, and I have this feeling that now that this is done, that things are going to start rolling in a different direction. You could see that 3 months as a lonely time. I don't really see it that way. I see it as a way to retain my focus and just keep my head in the game, so to speak. Now that the first draft is over, I think I can go out more and meet people and be more of a human being. But, in the subsequent drafts, I don't think you need the kind of focus that you need for the first draft. The first draft is very important to have focus. Okay, so I mentioned my computer not working and the tech problems. So I want to talk a bit about constraints. And I think constraints are actually very important, and they're often a gift. I'm going to tell you a story about Larry Hama. He's a comic book writer, artist, and editor, best known for his work on G.I. Joe, a real American hero for Marvel Comics. This was in the 80s mostly. He also did Wolverine, a comic called The Nom, and Batman, and he is a veteran. In the comic Silent Interlude, G.I. Joe 21 from 1984, the groundbreaking silent issue featuring Snake Eyes, Hama was on a tight deadline and didn't have a full script. As both writer and artist, he decided to create a story that relied entirely on visuals, eliminating dialogue and captions entirely. The result was a fast-paced, cinematic action sequence that showcased Snake Eyes' infiltration of a Cobra stronghold to rescue Scarlet. The issue's innovative storytelling and panel composition turned into an instant classic, proving that comics didn't need words to deliver an intense, character-driven narrative. So the constraints that he had led to the Silent Interlude, and it was largely because he was overworked and he had very tight deadlines. At the time, he was juggling multiple responsibilities as both a writer and an editor at Marvel. He was scripting G.I. Joe on a monthly basis while also handling other assignments, and deadlines were constantly looming. And I've read this comic a few times, I have to admit, read it, looked at it, better way to put it. I have to admit it's one of the best comics ever. It's an excellent comic. Just the way that the story is told is brilliant, and that's all because of constraints. So don't let constraints bog you down. I had a few weeks where I was really under constraints, and I could have lost faith and quit. I did not. It was definitely in the back of my mind. There was a moment where I wasn't really sure how I could continue, but I did, and I got through it. And the constraints actually made me tell the story a little bit differently, made me have to look at what I was doing, because before that point I was just kind of plodding along, And in this case, I had to kind of pick and choose what I was doing and just be more creative in how I accomplished it. Before I wrapped up the first draft, I did a few things. I wanted to kind of get my bearings. I rewatched some of my early videos in this series. Why did I do that? Well, I wanted to see if I stayed true to my initial thoughts. So if you're writing something, it doesn't hurt to record the process, because then you can look back on it and see what was going on. So going back to the beginning gives you perspective. It helped me see where I may have strayed a bit from my initial idea and get back on track. It helped me kind of see what I really wanted to do with the project, because sometimes when you're in it, it's easy to lose sight of the goal and the purpose of what you're doing. You're getting bogged down in the daily jotting down of words that you're not really seeing the big picture. Okay, jumping over to my stats. As you can see, I was pretty diligent in the last few weeks. Had a few days I didn't work. I mean, I was nowhere as good as that streak I had, but it is what it is. Okay, so if you take a look at my last week, I had an inspired weekend trying to wrap it all up. As you can see, I wrote a lot. My best day was almost 3,500 words. And then it kind of tapered off. I had my last odds and ends. I reached my goal on the 22nd, so I was 6 days before the deadline, which is good. And then my final first draft tally comes in at 88,524 words. So I was pretty close in my estimation. I had to go a little bit more. The second draft, I will probably be including more. I have a feeling this book is going to be at least 100,000 words in the end. We'll see. I mean, one of the things I said when I first started is this was going to be ambitious. It was going to be kind of a epic. So if it gets really large, I guess it does. Looking at my Excel spreadsheet, as you can see, I have this little tag ATT, which means attention. So the last probably week and a half, I was just focusing on those chapters. Those were the hardest ones to do, and I just couldn't get them right. And I ended up having to split some of the chapters. And the reason for that, once I got really into the Eleusis mysteries, I just realized it was too big to put into 2 chapters for the main mysteries. So I ended up having to break it up. As you can see, day 6 got broken up into 3 chapters, and then day 7 is just 1 chapter, 1 long chapter. It wasn't just the length of the chapters, it was also the storytelling within them. There were logical places to break it up. My chapter total worked out to be 33, magic number, kind of serendipitous, but I feel good about the structure now. I think the structure is pretty much intact. I may change some of the titles of the chapters as I go along, but for now, I feel pretty confident about it. My aftermath. Well, in my case, this would probably be different for every person, but some of this stuff applies to everyone. The main thing, I think, is to assess what you have. How do you feel about it? You know, typically people don't feel that good about a first draft. I feel two-sided. I know there are definitely problems in it. I do feel like I accomplished what I set out to do. I feel like it is there. It just needs some TLC now. They often say to put something away for a long time till you go back to it. I think there's wisdom in that for certain drafts. I don't know how much it applies to the first draft. Here are some questions to ask yourself. Where are the issues with the story or the plot, with the characters, with the setting, especially with the continuity? I think that for me is the main. I think the 2 things I really need to work on are the characters and the continuity. I have the characters down, but a lot of the dialogue I feel is a bit clunky. I need to add more subtext, and I need to be, have more digressions and things. A lot of what I put in is just necessary to tell the story, but, to give it flavor, I think it does need more dialogue that's a bit off topic, or even thoughts of the characters that's a bit more off topic, especially with the main character because it's being told from his point of view. Continuity has been a real challenge, especially in the second half of my writing process, because the computer broke, so I was jumping all over the place trying to get work done on my phone, and I totally broke continuity in doing that. The story's in my head, but I'm sure when I go back and I start reading it, I'm going to be like, what? Not just in the story, but the Eleusis rites have turned out to be quite a challenge. More of a challenge than I thought they would be. I did a lot of research for it, and I thought I was prepared, but as I got into it, I realized I was not prepared. Not as prepared as I could be. This is an important question. Where do I need to focus my energy? What sucks? What has potential? Where do I need to put my attention? I've already realized that my pantheon that I'm including, I thought I had it ironed out, but then once I went into the rites, I realized there were gods and goddesses that I did not account for and their relationships, and I want it to be its own sort of mythology, so I had to create a detailed list, and I did this over that last weekend because I just couldn't really get my head around it without it. In the last week that I was working on it, I started creating a checklist, and these are things that I need to pay attention for and resolve. I think it's quite important to have when you go into the second draft, just so you remember it all the things you need to figure out, things you need to do. And as you can see, I have several things I need to do. This weekend I'm going to celebrate, probably take myself out to dinner or something. I haven't really left the house much in 3 months, so I might go see a music show or something, I don't know. But I'm going to take a few weeks off. One reason for that is 2 new books came into my periphery that I think are going to help me. And one of them is Iamblichus's On the Mysteries, which will help me with the Eleusis rites. The other one is Carl Jung's Aeon, researches into the phenomenology of the self. Kind of dropped into my lap, actually. And I just have this feeling that it's important. And I've never read this, and it just appeared. And, like I said, twists of fate and serendipity, synchronicities. Definitely gonna read it. I started reading it yesterday, read the first chapter, but I'm gonna take about 3 weeks to dive into these 2 books and see if I can bust them out. On the Mysteries is 416 pages, so it's a little hefty, and the other one is 353 pages, so I have about almost 800 pages ahead of me to read in 3 weeks if I can pull that off. But if I don't, the first few weeks of the second draft I can keep reading, but I definitely want to dive into those. I have more films I want to watch. I just want to get my head back into the right mind frame. I'm a little exhausted. I need a few weeks to decompress, and I'm going to jump back into it. But I'll explain what I do in my second draft videos. The first one will be mostly about how I set it up and what I'm doing, and then it'll be more about the process, similar to what I did with the first draft, but slightly different because I'm not striving for word count now. I'm striving for finishing chapters, so it'll be a little bit different. But that's all I got today. Take care. Have a good day.